Welcome to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. Hi, and welcome to Positive Talk. Our show features the best positive stories and people from around the globe as we endeavor to answer the universal question of why am I here and what is my purpose? Understanding that can change everything, and knowing your greatness is fundamental to living your best life. So join us right now as together we work to create the adventure of our lifetime. And welcome to the show, everybody. We've got a really cool guest today, and it might take me the entire hour just to read his bio and stuff. But Jonathan Lash is with us, and he is an author. He's got a couple of books out, and he has got a book that we're going to talk about, which came out in July. And I'm real happy to talk to him about his writing style and how he did it. But first, I need to qualify who this man really is. He's a former Peace Corps and volunteer, a federal prosecutor, environmental litigator, and he served as Vermont Secretary of Natural Resources, a law professor, and president of a college. And in his spare time, Rolling Stone recognized him as one of the 25 warriors and heroes fighting to prevent a planet-wide climate catastrophe. One of the 100 most influential people in business ethics. Business ethics that's kind of an odd combination, isn't it? Jonathan Lash is here. Jonathan, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks, Kevin. I'm glad to be here.
So, and actually, question still stands: business and ethics, are they mutually exclusive, or are they kind of a thing?
Sounds like kind of an oxymoron, doesn't it?
It does.
There are some business leaders who have worked very hard to make the way they do business follow ethical standards. Take, for example, there's an investment firm in London called Generation Investment Management that was created by Vice President Al Gore and a partner of his. They make a ton of money, but they invest sustainably. In fact, they think they make a lot of money because they invest sustainably. So I see that as ethical business.
Well, and also what a lot of businesses don't get, and and I've said this before on the show, I would really like your opinion. And I'm sure that you've seen a ton of P&Ls in your time, which is a profit and loss statement. And they've got revenue and they've got costs and different aspects of the costs and stuff like that. So to give you an idea, the one line that I never see on any P&L is the cost of turnover.
Yeah.
And I would think that if an analyst were to come and to say, okay, this is it. You lose an employee. It takes 18 months to train the new one. That's the cost. And if you put that into the P&L, it might change a CEO's version of what turnover means to the company. Don't you think?
Particularly if it's a company that is being managed for the long term. I mean, if the CEO is only worried about what the stock price is next week, maybe he doesn't pay attention to his employees and whether they are getting satisfaction out of working there. But if he's concerned with where the company will be in a couple of years, he needs people who are committed to it.
Yeah, I worked for a guy that turnover was over 300% in the restaurant business, and he said, "Boy, I don't know why it's so high." And so I looked around and started talking to people, and they said, "Well, if you start talking to your employees, they would tell you why so many people are leaving.
Yeah,
and part of it's because of you, sir, and how you treat them and stuff. But a lot of guys that are in charge don't want to know the answer to that."
I've been lucky enough for most of my life to work for purpose-driven nonprofit organizations where the people who are there because they believe in what the organization is doing. And it's just an inspiring way to spend your time. It'd be very hard for me to go to an organization where I was just doing what I did to earn my pay.
No, you're much more committed to causes and things that you believe in than that. And that's what makes you really unique and extraordinary. And you've done so many things, from the president of World Resource Institute. Did you, when you were young, did you think that you were going to have the impact and to do the types of things that you've done?
No, not at all. I was too busy being crazy. Uh, but my father and mother were both deeply involved in politics and both very committed to social justice. And so I grew up thinking about politics as a way to try to change the world. So I guess I always expected in some way or another to be involved in policy and government and what would do the best to help people with their lives.
I do have to ask you, because I don't know if you've noticed, Jonathan, but we seem to be going through a very unique time in politics.
Yeah.
I would love your take on it.
It's so discouraging. We have a system of governance which has been the model for democracies around the world in the last 200 years. And we're watching it being torn apart piece by piece in a very short time by a politician who was elected absolutely fairly by people who were demanding change, but they weren't demanding destruction of their government.
And the amount of change that is happening, for those that don't know the current events. Currently, there is what has, I guess, been described as a purge going on, where they're letting many people go. And then, of course, there are people of the Justice Department that 5 or 6 major players that have resigned in the last day or so. So it's getting to be really, it's almost like the climate. The climate is getting really weird, and so is, a lot of these things are getting really kind of bizarre, I think.
And a lot of what's being torn down are things that have been carefully built by Congress over a period of decades, reflecting the demands that they were getting from their voters. They want their environment protected. They want a system that assures health care, even for people who can't afford it otherwise. They've supported that, and it's just being torn apart without any indication by Congress that they're ready to support that.
I was thinking about this during the LA fires. If you were to, you're an author. If you were to write a book about and to highlight what was happening in LA and all that, do you think it would sell, or would people say, no, that's too out there? That's never
right. You can't believe it.
They can't believe it's going to work.
Right. Well, we saw it in Hawaii, and then we see it in California.
And also, I have never heard of a hurricane going up as far as this one did and actually to the inland, and caused a devastation that I can't remember the name of it, but the devastation that it caused. We are in a really weird weather time. We have 3 major storms that are going across the country from west to east, and they're causing havoc all over the place. The weather's changing, isn't it?
It is changing. I mean, we shouldn't confuse weather with climate.
Correct.
Weather is what happens day to day. The climate is the overall system that's driving that. But the climate system has changed. 2024 was the warmest year ever recorded.
But Jonathan, I've heard that like 5 or 6 years in a row.
Yeah.
2023 was the warmest year ever recorded, or 2022 or 21.
Yeah, it has just been a process that is accelerating. And what is happening, the things we're seeing now, the phenomena, the fact that the ocean never freezes over at the poles the way it's supposed to, all of that's happening way sooner than the scientists ever expected it to happen.
Because they were talking about a lot of it happening by 21.
Right.
2100. Now it is 2025, and we are in the midst of raising sea levels,
Yeah.
and all kinds of different aspects of it. But why aren't we taking? And I know that I'm asking probably the wrong guy, but why is it that so many people still are saying climate change is a hoax, or it's not real, or it's not going to be as bad? It won't be as bad as all that.
Yeah, I think people resist information that would indicate that they have to change things that they don't want to change. So they're in denial. I used to have a professor who loved to say, denial ain't just a river in Egypt.
Yep. But is it because of the money involved that people don't want to deal with the fact that the job that they had will have to change, or they may not be able to work in that field anymore because I don't know. I'm baffled by it, because when you look at the weather, and when you look at climate, and you look at the ferocity of some of the things that we are facing, 4 and 5 level hurricanes,
Right.
and all of those things, and we're not paying attention to it like we should. I think personally, and tell me if you agree, I think we should have our hair on fire, because I'm talking about my grandchild who is 6 years old. What's the world going to look like when she gets to be my age?
And what's she going to be able to do about it? I mean, if greenhouse gases have built up in the atmosphere so that the level has doubled by the time she's in her 20s, the climate's going to change in a way that she's absolutely unable to do anything to slow down. It will have taken off. The only thing she'll be able to do is find ways to cope with it and live a life that we wouldn't want to have to face.
And we may have to face it.
Yep.
Because now the one thing that I've heard, now maybe you know about this, that I'm understanding that if the Gulf Stream, there's a Gulf Stream that goes in the Atlantic Ocean,
Right.
and if that changes and migrates south, then whatever's north of there is going to get a lot colder. There was a movie about that.
Yeah. I forget what it was called. That
2012 or something.
Yeah, that right. Yeah, so it's called the Great Ocean Conveyor, and there's a series of currents that drives warm water right up through the Atlantic up to off Greenland, and then as that water rapidly cools, it sinks down and goes back south again, deep at the bottom of the ocean, and that current cycle carrying warm water up through the Atlantic has brought warmer weather to Northern Europe. But if it's not cooling so rapidly, if Greenland has warmed up, then the thing that powers that great ocean conveyor, the cooling of the Gulf Stream when it gets up off Greenland, will stop. And when it stops, that will completely change the dynamics of weather, because all that warmth isn't going to be moving anymore.
And so that warmth, so it'll be a lot colder
for the Brits and the Swedes and the Norwegians, but not for us.
Oh, well, that's good. How's Greenland going to be? Because when we take that over, I was thinking I might build a summer house there.
Right. Probably a great place for pickleball.
I tell you, it's remarkable. By the way, we're talking with Jonathan Lash. He's got the book, and but I want to talk more about you and because it just fascinates me, Jonathan, that you've been around politics and politicians virtually your whole life.
I have, yeah.
And so you know a lot about what goes through their minds and their motivations and why are we not progressing better, or why? I guess I don't even have an answer. Do you have an answer as to why what's happening now is happening?
No, I don't know. We get the
Well,
politicians we deserve. I mean, we choose them.
well, sad but true. And it's sad but true. And the only one, Mitch McConnell, who I've had problems with for a long time, is the only one who's voting no on anything because he knows he's done and he's going to be retiring and he doesn't have to run again.
That's exactly right. It's been amazing. I wish he'd started 2 years earlier.
Exactly. It would that would have been really great. I'm going to have you on Unscripted Politics so that you and I can beat up on the conservative dude. that would be a lot of fun. Now you've got 2 books, and the What Death Revealed is the current book.
Yep.
That is out there, and we're going to talk about that when we come back. And also the Season of Spoils, which talks about the story of Reagan's administration and all the stuff that went along with that. So Jonathan Lash is our author. Go to his website, which is jonathanlash.com, and you can find out all about him and the books that he's written. And also, he has written a lot of articles and short stories and things like that. A very educated man, and we are lucky to have him here on Positive Talk. If I could talk, that'd be better. And we will be right back after this message. Are you looking for a powerful way to grow your brand while making a real difference? Well, Positive Talk is the perfect platform to align your message with inspiration, hope, and meaningful conversations. By sponsoring Positive Talk, your brand will reach an engaged audience that values positivity and connection. People who want to support companies that share their values. Take this opportunity to showcase your business in a space that uplifts, inspires, and creates lasting impact. Don't wait. Email me, Kevin@kmmedia.pro today to learn how you can partner with us and spread positivity while growing your brand. And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald, and Jonathan Lash is our guest, and he is an author. He was in the Peace Corps. By the way, sorry for my ignorance, is the Peace Corps still a thing?
It is, but maybe not for much longer. It's certainly one of the things on the chopping block.
How? But doesn't the Peace Corps do some great work for around the world, and also take young people and put them into situations where they can learn, I don't know, about life?
It certainly did that for me, and my wife and I met in the Peace Corps. It did that for both of us. It was just an incredible experience. You come from a privileged life in a big city, and you end up in the mountains beyond the end of the last road, and meeting groups of people who just have lived life totally differently. It changed my view of humanity.
Now, tell me if you agree with this. I firmly believe, now that I'm a little older and not 18 to 20 or 19 to 21 or whatever it is, I really think that kids should volunteer for a couple of years after high school before they get ready to go to college, so that they can get a better view of life and can help everybody. And if everybody did that, I think our children would be better off than they are today. Don't you?
I totally do, Kevin. Universal service would just make so much sense for us. Give kids a chance to have a completely different experience, to grow up, so they don't have to make decisions about their lives when they're just out of school and haven't had a chance to figure it out yet.
I know they do that in Sweden, and I'm not sure if they do it elsewhere, but I talked to a gentleman, as a matter of fact, the gentleman who recorded the song that I just played. His name is Tommy Tika, and his son was in compulsory service, and he said it's the best thing ever. He's not ready to go to college. He doesn't know what he wants to do with his life. And so this gives him a couple of years for him to figure it out and serve the greater good for all in the process.
All 3 of my kids took time off between high school and college, and it was absolutely the best thing they could have done.
I don't know how. I I don't know about you, but I remember I was 18 at one time. It was a long time ago, but I was 18. I had no earthly idea what I would possibly ever want to do for the rest of my life.
No.
And I know so many people that went to college, they got a degree, a bachelor's degree after 4 or 5, in some cases 6 years. And but they still didn't know what they wanted to do. And most of them, that piece of paper is sitting collecting dust because they're not doing anything about what they went to school for. So they ended up in something totally different. I think that we're not ready when we're that age. I agree. Compulsory service would be, of course, what an outcry there'd be. You mean you're going to make my kid do something? It's amazing. But in any event, you were in the Peace Corps, and then you were in government for a long time. Do you have any favorite stories about working in government, or any particular politician who you really thought had a clue and was really a good person?
Yeah, when I wrote that book you mentioned about the Reagan administration's record on the environment, I did a national book tour speaking about it, and one of the places I stopped was in Vermont. And after the election, Reagan had won re-election. I was discouraged because what they'd done to the environment was really appalling, although nothing compared to what's going on now. But some of my friends said, well, we have this wonderful new governor, the first woman ever to be elected governor in Vermont. She's really green. Can we suggest your name to her? So I ended up going to Vermont to work for Madeleine Kunin. And she's one of the bravest women I've ever known. She just, every year she would choose a theme and focus on it, and, take the criticism and let crazies like me go, do stuff that made the ski areas mad, and tried to protect the streams and mountains and so forth. And it was really fun. She had a great group of people working for her. The public, the Vermont public, was very supportive, and it was a chance to get things done.
And on the other side, Mr. Reagan, well, he was not. He was from the old school because and in those days, climate change was a new thing.
Yeah, right. And he appointed to key environmental posts people who did not believe that the problems were nearly as serious as environmentalists said, and who were angry about what they perceived as a group of left-wingers using the environment as a way to control private industry and limit what ranchers could do, and create all of these rules. And so they came in determined to change things regardless of what Congress might have passed. And I was shocked at the time, and several of the people he appointed ended up going to jail for some of the things that they did, but it's nothing compared to what's going on now.
But you know what is really interesting to me is, you think that you need some evidence. In the 80s and early 90s, they had the theory, but there really wasn't any evidence until Gore did the movie, and that kind of changed things a bit. But now we have abundantly a bunch of evidence every day that we can look at.
Yeah, if you had told me 20 years ago that it was going to be as clear as it is now, that not only was the climate going to change, but it had changed, and it was creating real impacts on people's lives, I would have said, well, if that's the case, the United States will be acting and acting powerfully to try to reduce emissions and protect us from that. And I never would have believed you if you'd said, no, we'll have elected a government of people who think it's all a hoax. I wouldn't have credited it.
But do they not have eyes?
You know, I don't, the rules have changed. Science is what you want to believe now. It's not what can be demonstrated.
Oh, so now it's kind of like fake news.
Yeah.
You get to pick your scientist, and by the way, it doesn't, if you can find a scientist, and they're harder to find these days, who doesn't believe in climate change, and then you stick by that one versus the 98 or 99%
Right.
of scientists that have concluded that we are in the midst of major climate change. And what I guess what people don't understand, and you help me with this, I'll use a metaphor. It's kind of like if you decided to slow down the Titanic, it doesn't stop on a dime. You cut the engines and you maybe put it in reverse, but it continues to move forward for a period of time. And that's the way climate change, to my understanding, is like. Even if we were to put the brakes on full stop and we were to do everything, that it would continue to move forward for a period of time and get worse. Am I wrong?
We have already changed the chemistry of the atmosphere in a way
that's
that
not good.
In a way that will take decades and decades, even if we stopped all emissions now, to begin to change back. And then I don't know how technical you want to get, but there are some feedback mechanisms that could take off and begin driving the process no matter what we do. For instance, there's fear that as the tundra begins to melt, that will release huge amounts of methane, which is a powerful climate global warming gas. And once that starts happening, it's a natural process. We can't restrain it. So even if we stop burning carbon, stop burning coal and oil, that process may drive climate change.
So there's a real possibility that the natural warming of the planet that we've created through man-made carbon dioxide and other stuff can put us in a situation where we're warm enough where the tundra starts to melt, and then thousands of years of plants and animals and other things will be released into the environment. See, I'm getting pretty technical.
You're getting good at this.
It will be released into the environment, and with the methane gas that will be created, and that will be a self-driving, self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. Well, here's another example that is probably closer to home for people. We've all noticed that when it snows, the white snow reflects a lot of light. It's just really bright in a way that it isn't when the ground is green and brown. Well, when the ocean at the poles is covered with ice and snow, it's white and it reflects the sun's heat. If the ocean doesn't freeze up because it's warmer, then the water in turn picks up the heat of the sun, and that accelerates the process of it being too warm to freeze up. Now that process has started at both the North Pole and the South Pole.
And then you get people that will say, well, we were told that the polar bear is going to be in big trouble because their hunting grounds are shrinking and stuff. And then somebody will pop off with, there are more polar bears now than there have ever been, which is probably not true.
Yeah.
But they will use that kind of weird logic to explain away what's actually going on. And then you've got the drill baby drill scenario of let's produce more fossil fuels that we can burn into the atmosphere, because none of that's real anyway.
Yeah. Well, there are people making money off that, so they don't want to hear anything that suggests they shouldn't be making money.
And yet, oh, by the way, I wanted to ask you, since you know such things, do windmills kill a lot of animals?
Well, windmills kill some birds. And depending on where they're built and how they're operated, they can kill more or less birds. But birds do fly into the blades and get killed.
Well, birds fly into my window and get killed as well.
This is true. Birds fly because big, tall office buildings are kept lit at night. Birds fly into the lights and crash and die. But it is certainly true that windmills kill some birds. They can be operated and placed in ways that reduce that damage. And they're certainly not the greatest hazard to birds. It's the loss of habitat, some of which is driven by climate change.
Well, and when you have a 80-story building that's made of glass, and the birds can't see it as they're flying along, that probably has got more to do with anything anyway. So Jonathan Lash is our guest. He's got a couple of books out. One is called Season of Spoils. The other one is What Death Revealed, a story of virtue, vice, and violence. We're going to talk about that one when we come back, because excuse me, he's a author, but he's so much more than that. But this is a historical fiction, so I want to talk about that. I love historical fictions. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Brushwood Media Network, the best in syndicated talk, news, and entertainment shows.
As you go about your daily life, look closer. As you gather with family and friends who love and support you, look closer. There are youth right in your community who don't have the home, warmth, and healing you have. So look closer. Every year across America, a staggering 4.2 million youth are homeless or trafficked. And for 50 years, Covenant House has worked relentlessly to keep them safe and protected. Tonight, 2,000 young people will sleep safely in a Covenant House bed. And tomorrow, they will wake up surrounded by love. They get clean clothes, hot meals, medical care, and a safe place to sleep. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In sites across America to help them fulfill the great promise of their lives. So look closer at Covenant House. To help or get help, go to covenanthouse.org.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. And Jonathan, I got to tell you, I'm on a quest. I'm on a mission. I play that commercial every time at the bottom of the hour because I still don't believe that there are 4 million kids that are going hungry in the greatest country in the world. Not necessarily judged by all anymore, but we can do better than that. And so until we can get rid of that, and we've got a place for kids to live, a safe place with food and education so that they can live their lives, I'm going to be playing that commercial every day. So I just thought I'd mention that.
I was going to actually say I really loved the commercial. With what's going on politically in the country, my wife and I have been looking for a community where we could be active, and we have found the Unitarian Church, which in our area is a very active and welcoming group of people. And that's exactly the kind of issue that we get to deal with there. I found it quite inspiring.
Wait a minute. You mean that there's a church that actually follows the teachings of taking care of the least among us and making sure that people have food and water and stuff? How bizarre. I'm just kidding. Yeah. I think that is awesome because there's so many organizations that are not taking on that challenge, because it's a big challenge.
It is.
But in any event, What Death Revealed, the story of virtue, vice, and violence. For those of you that don't know and I'm sure you've heard it or read it in history books, but 1968 was a terrible year for the United States. We had the Tet Offensive and in Vietnam, where a bunch of our kids were getting killed, and then back to back with Bobby Kennedy and then Martin Luther King were killed, and your historical fiction revolves around a little bit about Martin Luther King, and also, and I forgot to mention this, your work as a prosecuting attorney.
It's absolutely true. I am the ultimate late bloomer. So I'm 79, and this is my first work of fiction that I published.
Congratulations.
I stumbled into it. And I retired from being a college president and had no plans to become a mystery writer. And I joined a writers group. And one day the moderator of the writers group, a guy named Robin, who I'd actually gone to high school with, gave us a prompt. He said, write something about a dark scene. And I'm kind of sitting there wondering what, and I just started writing about this scene I sort of recalled from when I'd been a prosecutor, where I was sitting in this basement office, which just had windows up, kind of up above my head. It was really grubby, and the paint was dirty, and the desk had been all cut up. And my job was to sit there so that the cops who'd been out working the streets at night could bring cases, and I could process them or not, and move them on to the grand jury. And I was a brand new, totally naive young prosecutor, and these three vice squad cops came in, and so I just wrote about that scene, and I don't even know why I thought of it. It just came into my mind out of nowhere. And I read this to the group, and somebody said, well, that sounds like the beginning of a murder mystery. And it was like I went insane. These characters just took over my head. I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I think the characters had been waiting in there for 40 years to get their say and to tell me what a naive idiot I'd been. And so we just, them and me together, started working on this. And after that, it's not a memoir. It's totally made up. I mean, it's fiction, but it's fiction informed by experience. And Washington was in the process of building its metro system, its subway system, a $6 billion effort, and $6 billion in the 1970s was real money. And that was driving all kinds of corruption. And the city was an 80% black city that had a police force that was 80% white. Congress had controlled the city for years. Only after the assassination of Martin Luther King began letting Washington elect its own mayor and city council. So there was just a huge amount of racial tension in the city. It was undergoing a crime wave driven by crack cocaine and just anger and poverty and so forth. And I was practicing law, having a great time trying cases, wearing my blue suit and my power tie, and I just was kind of impervious to what was going on around me. I just, I worked there. This is the way it was. And it was as if these characters emerged out of the past to tell me what had really been going on around me. So this book reflects the combination of a set of murders and an intense struggle for power and for racial control.
What an interesting I've got to tell you, and I say this a lot because I interview a lot of authors, musicians, poets, all these folks, and they all tell me the same thing, just what you just said. I don't know where it came from. It just showed up, and it was almost like it wrote itself.
Yeah.
Because it did, and it was part of your intuition and bringing it all together, and it was an important piece. Did you ever stop to think that maybe the book was the ideas came to you from people that had actually existed in the past and were coming to tell you their story so that you could put it down, and that they were hovering around you as you were either typing or writing and saying, okay, put this in there, and then this is what happened, and then was that how it was?
There was even a point where I got sort of stuck in the story, and I had the characters interview me. I sat down and wrote out an interview where they were asking me all these questions, and it turned out they were really pissed off that I was getting off into all these kind of red herrings and subplots and stuff like that, and they wanted me to focus on the story and keep moving.
I got to tell you, I've never heard that you actually had the characters interview you, and to tell you what they wanted. But that makes perfect sense because it's a character driven novel, and it's designed to educate all of us, because a lot back then, that would have been in the mid 70s. Back then there was a lot of stuff that we didn't know.
Yeah, right. Or didn't want to know, or didn't pay attention to, didn't
Exactly.
understand. And of course, some of the characters are based on people who I knew, but I didn't know them well. And now I get the chance in fiction to think who they might be, who I imagine them as based on what I did know. And they're very real to me. I've started work on the sequel, and I'm so glad to be back in touch with them.
Oh, it's kind of like visiting an old friend, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is so cool. And by the way, you're 78 years young, and you've got a long time left to go.
Yeah, I hope so.
But by the way, we're talking with Jonathan Lash. You go to his website and buy the book from his website, or you can go to Amazon or any other places. The Season of Spoils. I need to get that book because it's the Reagan administration was interesting, and the way they attacked the environment, and also what Death revealed. That would be a really interesting read. And you got a sequel coming out, so get that book. And then any idea when the sequel's coming out?
I don't. It's going more slowly. A lot of people told me the second book doesn't come quite as easily.
Yep.
Some of the same characters. It's called O'Brien's Revenge.
Now, is anybody talking to you about a screenplay?
There was one producer who wanted to write a script on spec and then see if we could get together on it, but I've never seen it, so I guess he got distracted by something else.
Well, from everything that I've been told, it is difficult from an author's perspective. It is difficult when somebody else gets your hands on your work and turns it into a screenplay and puts their own touches into it, which may be contrary to what the intention of the book actually was. And then they have to cut out scenes because a screenplay only can be like 110 pages and stuff. So I think that you're better off doing this and then do the sequel and then write your own screenplay.
My father was a Pulitzer Prize winning biographer. He too was a late bloomer. He'd been a politician, he'd been a newspaper man, he'd been a columnist, and then he became a biographer. And one of his books was made into a TV. I think it was All in One Night, a couple of hours, an extended TV show. It was about Eleanor Roosevelt and Franklin Roosevelt. It's called Eleanor and Franklin.
Yeah.
So we all sat and. When this was made, we all sat and watched it, and he had to bite his tongue. I mean, he accepted that they were doing their best, but he's a scholar, and he had worked hard to get everything exactly right, and they were kind of smoothing things over and trying to make it the kind of drama that would come across on television. Guy named Ed Herman played FDR.
I think I remember that production, and that was, doing that. Now he won a Pulitzer Prize for what work?
For Eleanor and Franklin.
Ah, I should have guessed that.
Yeah.
And what can and see? So did he write more? How many biographies did he do?
So he did a second volume that was about Eleanor, The Years Alone. Then he did a book about Helen Keller and her teacher, Annie, called Helen and Teacher. He wrote a book about Roosevelt and Churchill, which actually, as a piece of history, was the most fascinating of all, because it was that relationship of two very great men trying to maneuver their own politics and also win a war against Hitler and Japan. Roosevelt didn't trust Churchill very much, but knew he was essential to Britain's victory in World War II.
He probably would have said something like, "That man drinks too much."
They probably did, yeah.
But I'm glad you're here. Jonathan Lash is our guest, and What Death Revealed, and that book came out in July. So pick it up now and read it, and then by maybe the fall, the sequel will be out. Maybe.
Yeah. I hope so.
Provided we're all still here,
right.
which is, and it's a little dicey these days. I don't know.
One of the things that I have enjoyed very much is I get emails from people saying, "Damn you kept me up all night," saying they just had to finish the book. That makes an author feel really good.
Well, and that you're going to enjoy that for a long time, because that once a book is out there, it's out there. And
there's something curious about mystery novels, though. Everybody knows that it's going to involve a crime and an investigation and a solution, right? I mean, that's no surprise, and they're only different because the characters are interesting. And authors think up these elaborate plots, but what really gets your attention and keeps you interested, despite the fact that you know that you're going to go through this process of solving the crime, is the characters and the people who do this. And a lot of them are damaged characters, but more interesting because of it.
Yeah, Columbo made the television series made a career out of that.
Yeah, right.
And so there are lots of, but it's interesting because I love historical fiction, because you're taking a real place, a real time, real people, and then making a story out of it, which is really cool. And so I want to thank you for that, and also thank you for your service. Thank you for all the work you've done. Now, of all the jobs that you've had, being a president of a college, and being a prosecuting attorney, and working in private in enterprise and stuff, what was your favorite job?
I think it was working in Vermont with Madeline Kunin. We got so much done. And it's an extraordinarily beautiful state, and the beauty of the state is essential to their economic well-being. People come there because it's a beautiful place and they want to enjoy nature, and so protecting it was in the interest of all the people who lived there, and they understood that, and it was a chance to just make a difference and see the impact immediately.
It's one of the things that seems to be a theme of your life, is to make an impact.
Yeah, sure. It's the most satisfying thing.
Well, and you have, and you continue to. So it's not an end. It's not a beginning. It's just a continuation.
Yep. Yep.
which is really cool. I would love for you to take a couple of moments, and since I love talking to people that have been on the planet a while, because you have a sense of history, of what's gone on before, and where we're at now, and where we can possibly be going. I would love for you to give us a couple of moments of your time to give us, your opinion of where we're going from here.
Well, it won't surprise you that I think that the trend that will shape it all is whether we are able to deal with climate change. That is an existential issue. If we can't deal with it, where we're going is to increasing crises and a vastly reduced quality of life, people struggling to survive. We've seen what happens at the very beginning with the terrible storms and the appalling fires. There are tens of millions of people who live near coastlines who will be affected by rising seas and increasing storms. I remain an optimist. I think human beings end up doing the right thing after they've tried all the wrong things. And this will be compelling. Our technological capacity is increasing by leaps and bounds. We will find ways that we can address climate change effectively. We can find ways not only to reduce emissions, but to begin to pull CO2 back out of the air. The question is just whether it'll be in time.
And I would really like your opinion. And I agree with you, because humanity has proven over time that no matter where we get to the brink of stuff, that we always come back because somebody comes up with something that is ingenious and we can get through it. Or we do the thing that would make the most sense to me, which we haven't done yet, is to come together as one and to realize that we're all in this together, and there isn't going to be a place that is going to be immune from a tornado or a hurricane or a major fire like this. Right. Then we're going to have to work together to make all of this work, and it can't be full of hate, division, and fear. It's got to be, we're going to approach it from a positive standpoint and really work together for the betterment of everybody.
Nature bats last.
Yeah. There is a T-shirt in there, I think.
There probably is, yeah.
And T-shirt does bat last, but we have got the ability as human beings to recognize that we're not different. We're all closer together than we are separate from each other.
And wouldn't we be happier that way?
Seems to me. Seems to me that if you don't have to worry about how much you hate somebody, and you take care of other people, I don't know. I mean, I seem to be speaking to a minority, but I think it's a growing minority of people that are really interested in being positive and creating positive change, because I can't think of what the alternative looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Why would you want to live any other way if you can live positively? I mean, what could be more satisfying?
I can't begin to tell you, because I do this show 8 days a week, just like the old Beatles song, and I love doing it, and I love talking to people like you, and positive people that you get it, and all we need to do is to convince the people. Okay, we're not going to convince the people who don't get it because they've got to, for whatever reason, but more and more people are getting it, and this conversation, I hope, will help.
I do too. Certainly more and more young people seem to be getting it.
That is, what's interesting about that is our overriding hope is that because they see how much we've screwed it up, and now in their teens and early 20s and stuff, they're getting the idea that there's got to be a different way. There's got to be a better way. This ain't working. And we're going to end up getting shoved off to the retirement home, I think. So let them take over, because we don't need a 78-year-old president, but that's just me.
But we do need 78-year-old authors and 80-year-old authors.
Yes, we do. We need 90-year-old authors. So Jonathan, I want to thank you so much. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we run away?
No, this has been a lot of fun. And I'm really glad you do this, Kevin. It is, it's reassuring to me that you're on the air doing Positive Talk Radio.
And I have to tell you, we're about to be on TV.
Good.
So I'm having to lose some weight and all that. As a matter of fact, lose some weight, and I'm going to get a hairpiece, maybe. I don't know. No, we'll. But I am so blessed because the show is growing. We're on the Brushwood Media Network. We're on television network now, and we're on 100 podcast sites, and we're translated into 30 different languages. Wow. And so all of that means that I can take someone like you who really gets it and present what we're talking about in a real meaningful way. And hopefully there are people that will listen to this and say, yeah, Jonathan Lash, he's a pretty smart guy. And I'm going to go buy his book, and which is called how was that for a segue? What Death Revealed, a story of virtue, vice, and violence. It's an historical fiction, and from a prosecuting attorney or a district attorney. Would you call that a prosecuting attorney?
Yeah, federal prosecutor. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm glad you're retired, because there's a whole bunch of stuff going on there that I don't even want to know about. So, Jonathan, thank you so much for being here, and we'll keep in touch. I'd love to have you back on. Also, would love to have you on Unscripted Politics, so that you can beat up on the other guy. He's a liberal, or he's a conservative.
It's been a pleasure.
And I want to thank you again for doing it. And What Death Revealed, a story of virtue, vice, and violence. The author's name is Jonathan Lash. Go to his website, which is jonathanlash.com, and you can find out all about him, his books, press releases, and all that stuff. And you can contact him and say, hi. That would be great. So, great. Jonathan, thank you so much.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Our purpose is to provide everyone with a positive, entertaining, and educational experience. I would love your feedback and comments about the show, including possible topics and great guest suggestions. Please email me at kevin@kmmedia.pro. And remember, be kind to one another, because each other's all we've got. That's Kevin@kmmedia.pro.